Hello, everybody. Welcome to day two. And oh, somebody's already typing on the chat. Good morning. Hi, Eileen. If you could just let me know that you can see the screen and if you can hear me, so I don't end up talking to myself and nobody able to hear. So if you could just give me whoever. Yes, Karen. Thank you. I'm glad that you're able to. Hey, Trish, Patricia, right? Okay, perfect. Everyone is saying yes. That is awesome. So, welcome to day two of the 5 day training, How to Believe in You, the art of transforming the self. So, this training, 5 day training, is about believing in your potential. So, potential is an infinite abilities for you to express, and that is something that you could decide, whatever that is. So the way that I like to sort of facilitate this training, the way that I usually do is that I have a topic, and the topic, the subject, the main subject is belief, right? This week, and I tend to go back to a similar topic every single day, and then begin explaining from different angle because if you have been with me, this kind of information needs to be repeated until it sinks in. So something that I briefly mentioned about yesterday is that understanding understanding is what you're gaining right now through the information, and that is not going to change anything. That is the entry point, the beginning, of course, to be able to change, because yeah, unless you have the information, how do you shift into something else? But the internalization and embodiment is what changes. And something that I'll be talking about today, which I didn't have a chance to talk yesterday, is the role and the nature of the subconscious mind. And I love that people are sort of engaging and interacting in a Facebook group. And I think, yesterday, just sort of go over, review the main point of what I talked about yesterday is that in order for you to change your belief, you don't need to change anything, right? You don't need to change yourself. The only thing, well, I wouldn't say anything. The only thing that you need to change is the conception of you, which is how you see yourself in your mind. Because something that, I want to make everybody realize is that who you are at the intellectual level, there is a part of you, the deeper self, the capital S self, the soul, that is you, right? I call that divine essence. And we're not going to go too much in that divine essence area on this module or on this training overall, because belief is an information at the level of your personality, right? So some people call identity, personality, and that self of who you are in this physical world, at the personality identity level, resides only in your mind. And I want you to get how deep and profound this one thing is. Like, you don't exist anywhere. The sense of self, the intellectual sense of who you are, you exist in your own mind. So you might be thinking that when you look at your mirror, okay, I see my face, I see my body, I like these clothes, I like this hair. And people live as if what they see through the mirror is them. But the real you is the picture that they're holding on in their screen of the mind. And those are thoughts, those are picture, right? So, and then what I said yesterday was that there are different ways to explain belief, but belief to me is an expanded version of the feeling. So thoughts, thinking is the language of the mind, quote unquote, based on Joe Dispenza, right? And the body experiences feeling. And when you feel something long enough, that becomes your belief. So I'm going to be talking more about the relationship between the mind and the body today. But one thing before I go into a different slide is to really talk about, okay, then how do we shift our belief? How do we believe in our potential? You know, how the beliefs are nested in our system. The entry point is to change the conception of you, because you are in your mind, and you are how you see yourself. You are what you think about you. And when you change your thought, it will change everything. So another way to explain, how you see yourself is you are just another thought. Who you are is just another thought. And then when you change your thinking, and when you change the subject, how I see, how you see, everything begin shifting. And that is truly, owning the power of your own mind, attention and direction of your awareness, and then begin choosing what you want and who you would like to be. So as I said yesterday, I'm doing this a little bit differently. So the reflection today that I have is, what are the worries and doubts that appear in your mind as a pattern? And then what do you want to say to yourself instead? So I want to remind everyone that this is a workshop or training on belief training, right? So how to believe in you, how to believe in your potential. And in order to engage in that idea, we need to know what kind of life we want to have, right? What do I want to believe about myself that would reflect in this physical world as a result? Like what would I love? Like what kind of lifestyle would I love? And in order to reflect that lifestyle in the outside three-dimensional physical world, what kind of belief do I want to operate from? Right? So that is the entire theme. But then yesterday I talked about, okay, the key point is how you see yourself, and it's about thinking. Now today I'm going to be talking about, because the topic is transcending biological fear. So we're going to be talking about this today and tomorrow, the two things that prevents us from seeing ourselves the way we want to. Because the truth is that, if you practice imagination, imagining in your mind's eyes who you want to become, and I think I gave you an analogy of having a white paper and then painting, you can paint whatever you want to be painting, right? So it's not a difficult thing to do. You just do it, right? You might have all the reasons that you might tell me that you are not able to do it, but you can do it, right? Now, but there is thing called three-dimensional life that would probably prevent you from freely painting that picture. And today is going to be a version 1, and tomorrow is going to be a version 2. So of course, one thing that prevents people from expressing and painting that picture freely, how they want to see themselves and what they want to believe, is the fear. And fear comes from two directions, which we're going to be talking about today, right? So the reason that I wanted to talk about the two obstacles, which is fear and tomorrow habits, is to help you become aware of those two obstacles that's constantly showing up in our life. And by understanding that, by learning, maneuvering through that, you can stay connected with that vision of how you want to see. So this is the reflection, right? What are the worries and doubts that appear in your mind as a pattern? And if I can remind you that you exist only in your mind, and you are just another thought, you can see how worries and doubts would not be good, would not be good, because if you are in your own mind, and if you are just another thought, the moment you worry and doubt, you start identifying and conceptualizing yourself as worry and doubt, right? So we want to identify those. So whenever that shows up in your mind, which is the conception of you, where the conception of you reside, you can shift out of it that this is not me and this is who I want to be, right? We need to have this neural circuit to shift out of that as quickly as possible before you start entertaining emotionally, because every single thing that you entertain in the feeling realm and emotional realm, you will be sending into a creative process, creative mechanism of the conscious or manifestation. That's not a conscious manifestation. Conscious manifestation is to choose what you want to manifest and sending that through the path of creative mechanism. But most of the time, people worry and doubt without being conscious about it. But nevertheless, when they entertain that in their emotional mind, they're sending to the path of creative mechanism, meaning that you're asking that for the universe, and then that's going to come back to them, right? So it's so important to identify what are the worries and doubts, and what do you want to say to yourself instead. So what do you want to say to yourself instead is what you're telling yourself, which is the image of you. So it's the concept of self that you want to begin nurturing and cultivating in your own mind. So I just want to go over quickly. So today is day 2, transcend biological fear, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I added biological. So I'm going to talk about what fear is and 2 ways of thinking that are making people stuck, which is related with memory and conscious imagination, and the myth of worthiness and self-love that I have been very excited about sharing with people, because this is truly a blind spot for people. So there is a tendency, and this happens in every single workshop that I do, that I don't cover everything that I plan to cover on day 1, and I end up sort of pushing back some of the stuff to day 2. So one thing that I didn't get to cover too much yesterday was this the nature of subconscious mind, right? In a little bit of manifestation. So before I go deeper into the topic of today, I want to talk a little bit about the nature of subconscious mind and also imagination. Now, many people, especially people who are joining live, I know that you probably think that you know the nature of subconscious mind and the imagination, but I'm going to remind you to listen to anything that I'm going to say as if you are hearing for the first time. Because when you think, the moment you think, when I say something, oh, I know that, you're closing the door to seek the depth of that information. So this is something that I tell myself too. Like whenever I listen to something, whenever I watch something, whenever I go to seminar, I sort of like act like I'm a baby, like I'm an infant. Infant that I do not know anything, just give me the information so I can be enlightened, right? So I want you to have that sort of attitude and mindset and energy, so it can, the information can take you deeper. This is what it is. One information can take you so deep, but then if you say I know this, you will not gonna allow that to happen. So that's what I want to prevent. So the traits, the different traits in subconscious mind, but one trait that I want to explain in conjunction with this week is that your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between what's real, what you imagine, and even what you're recalling as a memory. Yeah, I'm just adding a little flavor. Your subconscious mind cannot differentiate what you see in the physical eyes in the world and what you're imagining consciously who you want to become, or the memory, which is the activity of re-experiencing in your mind and then forming a mental picture in your mind's eyes. Now, I'm going to come back to this statement often. So we're talking about you don't need to change anything, but you only need to change how you see yourself. You're not changing the yourself part, but you're changing how you see. And then I said that you exist in your mind, but nowhere else, right? You exist, the concept of you is in your own mind, nowhere else. That's why when you change the way you see yourself, and when you begin saying things differently about you, when you have different thoughts about you, you're changing you, because that's the only place that you exist as far as the self as an intellect, right? Now, I want to combine that information into these traits of subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind, your brain, cannot differentiate what you see in the physical eyes, what you imagine in your mind consciously, the desired version of you, or the memory that you recall, that you re-experience within you. So can you see how this one section is huge for all of us? Like if you exist only in your mind, and the image, whatever the image that you hold at every single moment defines and solidify the identity of who you are. And then if you're recalling the past memory, what you do not want, over and over and over in your image, you can tell how much that is affecting the sense of self, the personality. Does that make sense? So, of course, the entire 5 days, the main topic is on how you see yourself. But at the same time, I really want people to get not just, that's an interesting idea type of lighter get, but so deep understanding and knowing that you exist in your mind. And then if that is the case, and if that's true, what is memory? What is the activity of memory? When I see the outside world through my physical eyes, how is that affecting who I am? And when I practice consciously imagining and visualizing in my mind eyes, what is actually doing that to my sense of self? Because one thing, which is perfect because it can be a theme of day 2, that people get caught up. And what I hear very often is that, okay, I know this law of attraction thing. I like the idea of spiritual life, spiritual being. Those are all fabulous, right? Like I know because like for instance, the content that I'm delivering and the message that I have to the world is not really a meditation one-on-one, right? Um, and it's interesting because when we do like a marketing stuff, the marketers, which I actually ignore, marketers tell me to not to use consultant language, meaning that, well, the general public wouldn't understand what you're saying, right? I don't care because 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 the conversation that I have is so important that, and then here's the thing, if I continue to speak the way that I speak, people who are ready to hear will show up around me. And I think that is more important than going back. There are all the other people who can sort of guide people from meditation 101 to 102 to mindfulness to spirituality, little, right? So that's not where I'm at right now, my focus. But in the marketing, we call this consultant language. I'm not afraid of using language that general public might not understand. I want people to become curious about it, and I want people to feel my energy of, we're spiritual energetic being. Um, and when I say that, people might say that not everyone can understand, but people who feel it can feel it, right? So the reason that I wanted to talk about that a little bit is because I hear this notion often for a lot of people that, I love the spiritual idea, I know about the meditation, visualization, but the reality, I hear this often, but the reality out there, And people tend to refer the physical three-dimensional world as reality, right? I think we need to graduate from that little by little. Like if you really starting to become convinced that you only exist in your mind, where is the reality? Does that make sense? If you really begin understanding and fully grasp this idea, the physical world is a reflection and the solidified version of our imagination and the energy that we're transmuting, where is the seed of reality? It's in our mind, right? So if the concept of you, the self, lives only in the mind, the real reality to me is in our imagination. And if that's the real reality, and if we have a free will, not willpower, but free will to navigate the attention to either go to an empowering state or disempowering state, we can dictate the reality. Does that make sense? So we are constantly, every single moment, and I'm not saying even every single month or every single week, I'm not even saying every single day, every single second, we're at the intersection, standing at the intersection. Well, this slide, this guy is at the deck, but imagine that you have two rows, right? From here, going to the left, going to the right. Every single second with our thinking, we are standing at the intersection of either going to an empowering road path or disempowering road path through the thinking that we can choose, the perspective that we can operate from, and the meaning that we can attach to any single situation. And that happens in our mind. Does that make sense? And that intersection and being there is the pivotal moment of the formation of who we are, the formation of the sense of self, because you can choose to focus on what's not working and begin telling ourselves who we do not want to be in a habitual way, or we can choose to use the word and the thinking that empower us so we can use our thinking and the image how we see ourselves based on how we want to see ourselves. Does that make sense? So one of the traits of the subconscious mind is that subconscious mind cannot differentiate what's consciously you're imagining or habitually recalling the memory from the past in the outside physical world. And if you, who you are, only exists in your imagination, in your mind, the real reality to me, and you can have any, opinion or perspective around this, but the real reality is not the physical world. That's where we experience the physicality, but who you are lives in your fourth dimension, imagination. So what is fear? So I like to say biological fear because fear is an experience that we are gifted through our biological mechanism. So I often talk about the three layers of brain: neocortex, limbic system, and the animal brain. And fear is an instinct, right? So when something going on right next to us, like a fire, we feel the threat. So fear informs us the danger in the outside world. And that fear, the neural circuit can be, people talk about trauma, can be stimulated and a trigger from the past. And then you see the outside world and you have that memory, and those two meet and get stimulated and trigger. But it's a biological thing, right? Biological thing, and it gets embedded in our neural circuit. Now, I'm talking about neural circuit. One thing that I wanted to mention, the word I want to use is that the reason that the fear today, the topic today, and habit tomorrow are the two fundamental obstacle is because fear and habit are based on the autonomic nervous system, meaning that we don't need to consciously think about what to fear, but the body biologically is designed to fear, right? When something is in a state of threat. Now, the habit, we don't need to remember how to ride bicycle. We don't need to remember how to drive the car and go to where we go every single day. But the habitual thermostat kicks in and it takes us there, right? That's because of our autonomic nervous system. So fear and habits are actually gift that the biology is gifted to react and to move us in an automatic way. Because if you don't have that autonomic response, automatic reaction, it'll be too late, right? So, but if we don't understand how this is functioning, easily we get owned by our own fear and owned by our own habit. But by understanding and by being able to suspend fear today and habit tomorrow, you'll be able to continue to create an environment inside to go into an empowering path. Because what is fear, right? Like fear shows up the lack and what's not working or challenging situation shows up in the physical world. And often that disrupt our thinking. We're talking about thinking, right? Now that we understand that who we are resides in our mind, and thinking plays a huge role in how we see ourselves and how to change our belief to be able to believe in our potential. In order to change our belief, we need to begin seeing ourselves differently and change our thinking. Now, what gets in the way to continue to stay in that empowering thought and to see ourselves in a way that we want to see is the interaction that comes from the outside, right? So I want to feel this way, I want to see myself this way, but I'm not getting the result, and that interrupt our thinking. Oh, somebody say that to me, and we take it personally, and that interrupt our thinking. But those are biological fear, right? Because there's a contrast that is contradictory to the empowerment that we want to, in the road that we want to set up, and something that's contradictory to that that appear in front of us. And we want to be able to suspend that so we can maintain that integrity of how we want to see ourselves. That's what we're talking about today. So two ways of thinking that makes us stuck. One is the physical, that the visible supply. The visible supply that makes us feel lack or missing, right? That's number one. And number two is our past, the past memory that dictates what we can think today. So I'm gonna share the whiteboard that I have been loving. I hope you love seeing that. And my goal is to improve my handwriting every single week. And explain a little bit about that sequence. This is your mind. And this is your body. The mind thinks. The body feels. Yeah. When you entertain a picture in your mind's eyes, there's a corresponding feeling in the body. So what we're intending to do is to use the conscious awareness of the mind to direct the attention to see things about ourselves the way we want to, including thinking thoughts that we want to be thinking. So the vibration of the body, which we call feeling, becomes aligned with it. Yeah. Now, this is the tricky point. The mind influences the body. So the thinking colors the feeling, but also the feeling body that you have been living contains information from the past memory that impact your thinking. So if you sort of observe how you're living every single day, this feeling body is so automatic, right? We talk about, and this could be any percentage, but we talk about 5% conscious mind and 95% subconscious. Sometimes people say 96 to 98% subconscious. Oh, subconscious, SC, and 5% conscious. Now, your body is your subconscious mind. So the feeling world, the body, operates 95%. So the way that we move through life, and this is sort of like a combination of what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, is highly habitual because the body just moves on its own in a way that is wired as the feeling. And notice that a lot of the feeling stuff contains information from your memory. I'm just going to write memory because I don't want to get confused with the memory, right? So the past memory impact our thinking. And then this is your physical eye. So the concept of I is in your mind. Now here's another I, which spells differently. And you see that information from the physical world through your senses that stimulate your thinking. So you have, number one, a memory from the past that is a part of the feeling that triggers your thinking, and the outside world that comes through your eyes that stimulate your thinking. All these are contributing to your thinking, which is the world in the mind that is constructing the sense of I. Does that make sense? I just want to give you this visual that how the dynamic of the world that we're living. The vision, and I'm just making it simple, right? We have 5 senses, but visual that interpret the physical world leads you to think thoughts. And if thought is a relevant part of constructing the conception of who you are, because you live in the mind, this information that gives you thought is vitally important to form the sense of identity. Now, the memory from the past, which is in your feeling, also cause you to think thoughts by re-experience what happened in the past. And that allows you to think another thought that continues to add up to form the sense of self. But here's the thing. We don't have any control over the outside. So what we need to practice is to extract things that empower us to translate that into our thinking. And when things that are limiting, that might possibly lead us to think disempowering thoughts, we need to learn how to suspend it, to not to take in. To some extent, I hope this visual is helping you to see how actually we are forming the sense of self, who we are constantly, unconsciously. So when we see the abundance, when we see an enjoyment, when we see a sense of gratitude coming from the outside, well, of course, we want to take that information and transfer into our thinking. So that energy and the empowerment can be added into our sense of self. But what we want to learn how to do to practice is when the outside situation describe the contrast that gives us a sense of fear, which is lack, which is judgment, which is criticism, right? We need to be able to suspend that and not to transfer into our thinking. Or if you end up having a thought, being able to shift out of that to the thinking that we want to nurture to create and continue to develop the sense of self. In past memory too, if you have things that you are so appreciative, if you have memories and experience in the past that you felt blessed, you always want to use that to our thinking to be able to continue to build a sense of self. But if there's a disempowering information that coming through the memory, we want to learn how to suspend it, because we were there in the past. And if we continue to recall that and create thinking through that memory, we're going to end up repeating the things that are not serving. Does that make sense? So these things are the two things that makes us stuck. If you're living based on the memory, the past self, you will create more of the same thinking. You will be in the same belief. If you're taking on things from the outside world that is not serving you, because we don't have any control over the outside, we won't be building the thoughts and the belief based on where we want to go, right? So suspending this is critical. Now, then what do we need to do? What do we need to do to nurture our thinking, right? So the conscious imagination is the key. So let's go back to this. No matter what happened in the past, no matter what's happening in the outside, there is an awareness and the moment of space that we can choose any thoughts that we want to be thinking. And this requires a little bit of practice. Conscious imagination, right? You begin entertaining the idea of the desired outcome. So you have, let's tie it into this, the entire topic of this week. So you sort of did the reflection yesterday through what kind of belief you want to have, right? When you have the belief that you want to have, what is the outcome outside? And what is the thinking that's associated with it? How do you see you? And that picture needs to be entertained consciously. And here's the thing, sustain the attention there. And number one, be able to picture that. Number two, be able to sustain the attention without getting distracted with these two things, the outside and the past version of us. Number three, to practice long enough so we can connect with the feeling of how it feels to see that. And that's how you retrain your feeling body. We need to stay in the conscious imagination of the new belief, the desired outcome, desired version of ourselves long enough and frequently enough, and practice how it feels to be that version in your imagination. And the imagination is the only place that you exist, the sense of self, right? So at the beginning, because the desired version of you is somebody who you believe that is currently not you, it might feel awkward. It might feel like out of place. It might feel like you're faking. But the more you entertain that imagination and practice that and become familiar with that scene, and the thoughts and what you see you in a different way. And the more you practice how it feels for you to be that version in your mind, now you're altering the feeling body to meet who you are in your mind. The mind is the only place that you exist, and the body correspond that as a feeling. Now we need to do a little bit of bridging the gap process to allow the body to feel the new version of what you see in your mind long enough, frequently enough, so the body start vibrating in the new state. Does that make sense? So conscious imagination is truly using your attention and the power of imagination that only humans have out of all the other animals. Uh, Animals do not have the ability to imagine out of nothing, but humans do. So this is the gift that we have called mental faculty, using imagination and then understanding this dynamic between the mind and the body, the thinking and the feeling. We want to train our body to feel who we are in the mind. And meanwhile, we need to be very protective with our thinking so that visual from the outside and the memory from the past do not influence our thinking and our imagination, or notice that it's doing that and be able to shift out of that. So I want to briefly mention about the worthiness that many people talk about and self-love. So I'm curious to know, now that you know, based on this week's conversation, yesterday and today, yourself only lives in your mind. I'm curious to know what self-love is for people. So this is my perspective, right? Um, because people often use the term self-love to work on loving their pain, whatever the emotional pain that they had from the past, right? And the self exists only in the mind. And self is dynamic, it's not determined. There might be a memory about you from the past. And I think the term self-love is commonly used in the spiritual world to love yourself fully. Now, what does that really mean when the self exists in your mind? I'm just sort of throwing this out there so people can begin thinking about it. Now, when we understand that we are here for a reason, and we're here on this earth plane to accomplish a certain mission, which you can decide what that is, because the expression of you only come from you, but not something that others can decide from for you. The true self-love for me is to love your potential. So this week we're talking about how to believe in your potential, right? There is a version of you that already exists, because nothing is created nor destroyed in the spiritual plane. So all the possibilities, highest creative possibilities, exist in the spiritual plane. And the work of conscious manifestation is basically simply aligning our thinking and the mind with the spiritual plane, so we can manifest that into the physical third dimension. So self-love is, of course, embracing our past, right? Because we don't want to deny it, but we never want to accept. It's not about accepting the pain. It is about releasing the pain by understanding that we are powerful if we choose to, and when we own our own mind. and understanding that you are in your own mind and you have an ability to navigate that energy to become whoever you want to be and who is the authentic self. This is another language that I hear often. Like authentic doesn't come from our programming or limiting belief about anything, but through true authenticity is the sacred version of you that is waiting our recognition, which is our true potential. So true self-love is about loving your possibilities and potential of who you can become by committing to focus on engaging in the conscious imagination, the desired outcome in your mind, because that's the process of cultivating and nurturing your best self, and to work on bridging the gap between your thinking and the feeling. So vibrationally, the feeling wise, you start feeling worthy to match that ideal version intellectually. And the worthiness needs to come from your own decision and based on who you want to be, not depending on the eyes of the outside. So what I really mean by that is that, people who are not feeling confident, they start feeling confident when there's a good feedback, when there's a criticism from the outside world or lack in the visible supply, people start feeling less worthy or less powerful, right? But what if you can just create that worthiness only using your imagination and the choice of what you want to think? Because the self that's living and resides only in your mind doesn't need to dictate the eyes from the physical world, the visible information from the physical world, and your past memory. So at the beginning, when we are cultivating our confidence and belief about ourselves, yes, when there's a compliment from outside and recognition from outside or somebody liked you can borrow that energy to begin nurturing. But if we only relying on that outside information for us to feel worthy, we will never be able to have a rock solid, unshakable belief and confidence and power inside of our mind, because that is being built by the recognition of the outside. So I just want to mention that because the the construction of the self in our mind is so important. And I think there's a little bit of misinformation around the concept of self-love and the blind spot around worthiness. The worthiness needs to be a knowing of your power within without any outside validation, ultimately. Does that make sense? And you choose the thoughts that empowers you. You are worthy because you choose so. You don't need any other reason. You are not worthy because you have this or because someone told you this. You're worthy because you choose to and you want to. That needs to be the only reason for you to feel worthy, because you are seeing yourself as that, and that's that with your choice. That is the conscious imagination. Conscious means that you're intentionally and deliberately choosing to see yourself in a certain way, not because of anything from the outside, anything from the past experience. Every single moment, we're in an intersection of going to either an empowering path or disempowering path. And we need attention and the deliberate attention to what thoughts we want to think, what image we want to hold about ourselves, and your concept of you, who you are, only lives in your mind. So how you see yourself is essential in building the belief. And we're not changing who you are, but you are just working on shifting how you see from the inside. That is it for today. I know it might be a good amount of information. You can probably review a little bit. And if I go back to the reflection, see, I said that I'm going no longer than 45 minutes, and I'm going 52 minutes. Day 2 reflection again is, what are the worries and doubts that appear in your mind as a pattern? Worries and doubts always appear based on the outside or your past memory. It never appears from your conscious imagination, because conscious imagination is you're choosing whatever you want to imagine. I don't think you would choose consciously worries and doubt, right? So this is a reactionary pattern that comes from fear. So we want to identify what those are, and then what do you want to say to yourself instead. Cool. If you're in the Facebook group, please share your reflection. And I'm gonna come back tonight to sort of check in. And that is it. Thank you so much for joining everyone live. And if you're watching this replay, tomorrow I'm gonna come back to talk about transforming the habitual self. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.